Hello computer gamers, this is Insomniac Andrew, and this bloodless episode number 23 of From Dota to League is brought to you by vanilla flavored yummy yogurt and white rice. So, last, episode number 17 we talked about Janna, and I wanted to clarify something about her because I didn't know as much as I could have obviously about her. I want to talk a little bit about her ultimate. I just wanted to explain something. So as far as I can tell, it does have two uses. One is it has a knockback that's a lot like Keeper of the Light's knockback in his ultimate, from Dota 2. And, we've already established that pretty well, I think. And there's also the healing. I'm not sure if I mentioned that there is a healing or not, but there is. Now, the funny thing about the healing is that it's actually channeling. So there's basically an instant effect of the knockback of this ultimate, and then if you want to, you can just stand still, just continue the channeling in order to heal over like 3 seconds or so. And each second it heals with relatively high value compared to your ability power. And of course a flat value, that I suppose increases per level, but I'm not really sure. But anyways, so yeah, that's Janna for ya. So if you do need more healing, then just continue doing nothing for a few seconds, and then you can resume your normal activities. So that's one thing I was having difficulty with lately, is I was playing her and I just wasn't healing myself or whoever I was fighting with, because I thought that I could just, do the knockback and just run around and everyone would get healed, as long as they were nearby me. But it seems that if you are moving around after the knockback, you're canceling the heal. So it seems that you do have to stand still in order to get the heal. So keep that in mind, guys. So it's kind of like a combination of the knockback, Keeper of the Light's ability, and Keeper of the Grove way back in Warcraft 3, his ultimate, Tranquility. So indeed, it's not as flexible as I thought it was, but it's still pretty nice and strong as long as you keep that in mind, the limitations that it has. Alright, so moving on. We did talk about Galio, I think a ways back, didn't we? No. I don't think we've gone over him yet. So I recently purchased him, so expect me to talk about him in a future episode after I gather more information. I do want to be more accurate about him than hopefully I was when I talked about Janna. I think there's something about his ultimate that I've just learned recently that I am not taking full advantage of. So I'll have to get that figured out and understand a bit more about him later. But in the meantime, today's episode we're going to talk about Fizz and Trundle. So I've been playing a lot of Trundle, and Fizz was free to play last week, so I got quite a bit of experience playing him. Now Fizz actually, I guess in patch 5.6 is going to be getting some nerfs. Now I actually misunderstood Fizz's second ability, and I guess it's been changed a lot over the patches, so I guess it's to be expected that it's going to change again. But for now, there's this craze of getting what they call attack damage on Fizz, but it's not so much the attack damage as the what the item does itself. So the Blade of the Ruined King, what it does is it drops the enemy's health faster from 100% to 50% than it does from 50% to 0%. Okay? So that's what Blade of the Ruined King does. And Seastone Trident does the opposite of that. It drops their health faster from 50% to 0% than it does from 100% to 50%. So, that's Seastone Trident becomes stronger the more attack speed you have. Now I do believe the new nerf, I don't know whether or not it's going to change whether it's the missing health or not, or current health or whatever. I didn't look at that, I forgot. But that's another thing that I struggle with sometimes. Sometimes I confuse how it increases damage. But anyways, yeah, it's been a percentage thing, and now they're doing the percentage thing of over 3 seconds. So it sounds like they're gonna make it like Leandre's Torment. So the the craze was, instead of getting Leandre's Torment, I guess, people would buy Blade of the Ruined King. Because Kaizen does the same thing, and it forces the opponent to get not only armor, but magic resistance as well. They have to get both. Armor for when they're 100 to 50, and magic resist from when they're 50 to 0. So it turned Fizz into a hybrid damage monster, is the bottom line, getting Blade of the Ruined King. So it looks like the developers don't like that, and they want to focus on his AP power. So that's the direction that they're taking the nerf, it seems like. I'm not sure how much it'll affect him overall. Yeah, he still has on-hit damage, but it kind of looks like they're tweaking him to be more along the same power level of Teemo. You know, because Teemo, he's got a balance there with his passive, in that it's dealing some damage over time, and it's also doing some on-hit damage. Now, it's not a crazy amount of one or the other, which is how it kind of is for Fizz in the current patch. So, overall, it looks like they are definitely working hard at making sure he's not too strong. In the meantime, he is pretty good once you get the hang of him. Now, as for summoner spells for this guy, I'd recommend Cleanse, just because it makes sure that you're still alive. Now, it's just me personally. I do think it's actually, if you're not very good at him, or even if you are maybe, it could be a good idea to go with the green enchantment if you're jungling with him, because that will just make it so he's a lot healthier, so it'll be a lot harder to kill him. And you know, it's way more forgiving if you do get caught out, but I think it's better to go with the purple enchantment perhaps, because you're able to attack way more and get way more out of the on-hit magic damage from the Seastone Trident. So it's a little bit of a complicated ability, and they are changing it. So the bottom line is it scales with your attack speed and your ability power, and that's about the gist of it. Currently it does have a passive and an active, and I think the future incarnation will also, but I am not entirely sure. It might become entirely passive. I don't know about that. But I think the only stuff they're changing might just be the passive, or maybe I forgot what it said. But anyways, it's a long duo story, but the bottom line is it's dealing damage over time, and it's dealing on-hit damage, and it's pretty crazy stuff. And so basically, I do believe they're trying to make it weaker with Blade of the Ruined King, but we'll see how that turns out. Who knows, it might even turn out to be even better, but I doubt it. Anyways, moving on. So his first ability, of course, it also scales the ability power. This is an interesting ability though, because it procs on hit effects, like Blade of the Ruined King. I wouldn't necessarily agree that Blade of the Ruined King is all that great. Now, another thing to keep in mind is this is not as strong as, like, say, Ezreal's on-hit spell thingy, because for Ezreal, he's a lot more safe. He can cast this from quite a distance, and it'll apply this, you know, and this is gonna be like a frozen mallet debuff, right, to slow the enemy down. So it's a pretty flexible item, and really says a lot for, you know, whether or not you want to build attack damage or ability power. It just kind of comes down to what items are good for you. Definitely, I don't think this ability is overpowered in any way. And if you do want to increase your damage, you do have to build ability power. I think he should probably get a little bit of AD scaling with this item, kind of like the Sivir and her Boomerang with her AP, but whatever. It's not that big of a deal, I guess. So, the main thing to keep in mind is this is a dash, basically. And one thing that I have screwed up on is the fact that you have to target a unit with this. You cannot just target the ground. So that can be frustrating. If you do want to target the ground on something, you're going to have to use your third ability. So if you're planning on making an escape soon, reserve your third ability for that escape. With that in mind, You can still kind of jump into fights. If your third ability is still on cooldown, you might still be able to get away. But if you're trying to do that, I would recommend you to put extra points into your third ability because the cooldown gets reduced as you level it up. So that's what I've been doing a lot. Is I kind of end up kind of fighting over whether or not I should level up my second or my third ability all the way up. Which one do I level up more? Depending on how safe I feel, I guess, when the opponent's chasing me. I think the bottom line is you want to get lots of kills, but you also want to not die. So you can try to get a balance in there somewhere. Seastone Trident is primarily trying to get you your kills, and then to survive, keep yourself alive, you're primarily going to be using your third ability, seems like. Because you really can't jump away unless like an enemy that's going to die anyway happens to be where you want to jump on them, then you can use your Q. But that's not going to be a very common thing. And it's not like it resets in your cooldowns or anything by doing something like that. Like if you're playing Katarina or Kha'Zix or somebody like that, he doesn't really have cooldown reset mechanics, unfortunately. But he's still pretty fun. So, now what does the third ability do exactly? Well, this is a really interesting ability, and I don't really understand it completely, but it appears to be pretty important that you are paying attention to the animation and the ability, because he becomes more effective if he's like at a certain position. I don't know if he's completely upside down or what's the deal, but he uses his trident, to help him perform this jump and become untargetable is the bottom line. And he is able to actually jump over terrain with this. Sometimes, or even maybe all the time, you're going to have to jump again. So you can activate it twice, in other words, rather than just once. And it's interesting. It does some damage, but the damage seems to be somewhat negligible. At least I think it does damage. At any rate, what was I trying to say? Well, I mean, there isn't a whole lot else to say. This is just like, you could still take damage, of course. Someone might have already cast Ignite on you, or they might cast Ignite on you between the jumps or something, and that damage may still tick down. So if you're not a fan of Cleanse for whatever reason, you could take Barrier, because that would be a way of countering the Ignite, because that would block out all that damage. And of course there are other champions that are doing damage over time, like Darius, and his basic ability does magic damage, which is another champion we could talk about today, huh? I think we will, because I have learned quite a bit about him since he was free to play last week. Anyways, yeah, I think I was primarily playing Fizz and Darius a lot in the jungle. I could just talk about him tomorrow. I think that's what I'll go ahead and do. Anyways, I was surprised to find out that Darius does some magic damage. Because Fizz is pretty much all magic damage himself, but Darius does that much greater mix. The strange thing though is that Fizz he's not bad with, if you want to build AD on him, just because he's so mobile. And that's a general rule of thumb. Like, consider Janna, for example. Since she does have that shield that increases attack damage by a certain amount, that means she could theoretically get crits, and she could crit that extra damage, and that would be cool. Probably not the best use of the champion, but in a pinch, it could be something that she could go for. It's kind of the same deal with Fizz. But I think the problem with that Riot has had with the Seastone Trident and Fizz is it's just, they were like, oh, okay, it was too mainstream. People were buying AD on him way too often, and they just wanted to be more of a niche choice rather than a go-to choice. So that's why he's getting nerfed. But I think he's still a pretty strong champion, mainly because his third ability is just so darn good, and it's just so darn hard to kill him. I had very little experience with him, and literally all I had to do to keep him alive was to get enough damage to be able to kill people, and pick up Cleanse, and just level up my Playful Trickster really fast, and bam! Max level Playful Trickster, using Cleanse, I'm able to get out of trouble anytime I need to. I was able to go, like, I don't know, killing maybe half a dozen times or more and not dying once and getting a handful of assists and making the enemies rage quit or something like that. They surrendered. So he's pretty cool. Now, his ultimate. This is a really interesting ability. So it appears to be like you target an area, and it's like it locks on to a certain hero that walks into the area, basically. Now, I'm not sure if they can actually see the area that you're targeting or not, or how easy it is to see it. And then anyway, so it locks onto them, and then there's no escape once that happens. And you will actually do a knock-up on them, and if it deals enough damage, then they're dead, basically. But if not, then it just knocks them up, and that's it. Oh no, actually, it does slow. So there's a lot of crowd control in this because it. So once the champion touches it, in other words, they get too close. That's when they get slowed, and then when the fish does jump up, that's when the enemy units are getting knocked up, and then they are dealt magic damage and slowed. So this reminds me a lot of Dota 2 Kunkka's abilities. It's kind of like a combination of Torrent and Ghost Ship. So Ghost Ship, of course, targets a specific area, and one thing to keep in mind is it has a minimum cast range. Chum the Waters does not have a minimum cast range, so you can cast it right on top of yourself in case a bunch of people are jumping at you. So this can help you out a lot if your Playful Trickster's on cooldown. Anyway, so, but you can cast it at a pretty good distance too, so that's nice. So it can be really good for initiations or just general crowd control. My computer's going crazy. Sorry. It wanted to. It thought it wanted to power save, but it's fine. It was just turning off the monitor, I guess. So, what's the deal with Fizz? Well, like, this ultimate's really flexible. So there's no minimum cast range. And then not only that, but you're not targeting the location after somebody touches it. Once someone touches it, then you lock onto that guy. So it's kind of like X marks the spot all of a sudden, because you've marked that champion and he's going to get knocked up for sure. And anyone around him is also going to get knocked up. Also, while he's marked, he is slowed. So that is pretty cool because it makes it easier for you to close in on him or to run away. So that is really great. On top of all that, there's the knock-up. So that's why it's similar to Torrent. So it's like 3 of Kunkka's abilities all in one. It's like really awesome. So I definitely think it's worthy of being called an ultimate ability. And that's one thing that I kind of like about League of Legends, is that contrary to the direction that Dota went into, a lot of the ultimates really feel like ultimate abilities. Like I talked about, what was that one hero called? Oracle. He definitely has an ultimate that's worthy of being called an ultimate. But somebody like Vengeful Spirit, not so much. But anyways, moving on. There isn't a whole lot else we could say about him other than he does have a basic ability. It does exist. And what can we know about this? The best way to explain what it is to go into the masteries, look at block, and possibly unyielding as well. So it's basically this: reduces incoming damage from champion basic attacks by a certain value. So I think at level 1 it's like 4, and then when he gets to like 6 or 9 or something like that, it's like 8 or something. So it increases as he levels up. So not a huge amount, of course, but still a respectable amount, and just makes it that much harder to kill him, I guess. And of course, it does seem to make armor pretty valuable on him overall, I guess. So it makes him a little bit more flexible in item choices than he otherwise might be. And also, of course, he scales rather well with the health, which is why I said that he's not so bad with the green enchantment. If you just want to give it a try, I think you'll be pleased by it. So, yeah, he's got some innate defense, which is pretty cool. There's not much else to say about him, and that's Fizz. So, What was the other guy we're going to go ahead and talk about? We're going to talk about Trundle. Trundle is either going to get or he just got some buffs, either in 5.5 or 5.6. It's Frozen Domain. So this is the main thing that got buffed, I do believe. Now, they changed it so that it's got a heal amplification is what it has, healing amplification. So it used to be, I think your healing amplification would be like 8, 12, wait, maybe that's not right. I'm not sure what the values were. I want to say 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 20, but that doesn't sound right at all, because that's like 6 levels or something like that. Well, whatever the values are, now it's at its max value at level 1. So it doesn't scale as you level up. The healing amplification does not. The other stats do scale as you level up, though, I do believe, like the attack speed, the movement speed. So in this area, your lifesteal, your heal from your summoner spell, potions, the healing from your ultimate, the healing from your basic, all that stuff all gets increased by as much as the maximum percentage is at level 1. So that's pretty nice. I would still probably level this up when I can over Pillar of Ice generally, but this is pretty cool because it already buffs something that I was already doing, which is maxing out Chomp first. It's what I found to be most successful in the majority of cases. A lot of the time I'm playing against an AD top laner anyway when I play Trundle, and so this just, since I take away some of their AD, it just makes me so much more effective, as well as giving myself bonus AD. So I maxed this out first, and now since they're buffing the Frozen Domain at level 1, this just makes my skill learning order that much more effective. So that's pretty nice. Now, King's Tribute, they're also buffing it a little bit, in that they're buffing the range. So at a certain distance, when the minions are dying, and it works for champions too, I suppose, he gets a percent of their maximum health. So as the game goes on, his basic ability gets stronger and stronger, even if it doesn't scale with his level, which I'm not sure if it does or not, but it'll automatically scale as everything else is getting stronger. So that's pretty nice. So it makes Trundle a pretty good late game monster overall, so that's good. And so they extended the range by like 200 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure how much, but not really a big deal. But it's kind of nice. I guess it makes them more relevant in really more expansive team fights. Especially if you didn't get a kill on an enemy champion, but your ally did, or maybe your ultimate got the kill. He might be too far away, perhaps. I'm not sure exactly how his ultimate works. I still need some more practice with it, and I don't really play him all that often. But people can run away and they can still die to it. So it's a little bit like Doom. Doom's ultimate from Dota. It's called Doom, and so it's kind of like that. Only it actually gives you the other guy's stats, including his health. So you steal the health. So that's what I meant earlier by the healing that you get from it. So it's pretty cool. So in other words, if somebody was far enough away that they still took damage from your subjugate and died, but they were too far away to get healed from the King's Tribute, that might change now that they buffed the King's Tribute range. So that's pretty cool. You can kind of think of it as like Ice Frog buffing Necrophos's Heartstopper aura. It's kind of like that. So it can make more of a difference in Trundle's survival than people might think. So that'll be nice. So they gave him some buffs. Now what are all of his abilities doing exactly? The King's Tribute, of course, it only heals health, I do believe. I don't think it has anything to do with mana. So you're still going to want to worry about mana. So what I actually do for him is I give him a Frozen Heart. Because what that does is it gives him like 20% CDR as well as 400 mana to work with. So that way he lasts a pretty long time before he has to go back to the fountain. And then, beyond that, I have Feast, which helps with a little bit of the mana restoration, so not that big of a deal. And yeah, so I just make the most of it, and give him some armor. With the more armor, he's able to, with all these heals, it's just, he reduces everything and just makes him stay on the battlefield a lot longer, which improves his experience gain, and plus he's always around to farm minions too, and that helps for, just farming up and being stronger and stronger as the game goes on. Now, Chomp, how does this work? I'm a little iffy on how this works. I know it's really good. I'm just not sure how good it is. I have been buying Hydra on it, which is really great because then you activate the Hydra or even the Tiamat, and it'll do a lot of damage because you have this bonus damage from the ability, and you get to cleave all of that. So that's really cool. But what I'm wondering is, does that debuff transfer over to more than one unit with the cleave? That's a possibility. I'm not sure if it does or not. If it does, then he's a little bit stronger than I thought he was. But either way, I've got a lot of intimidation behind the way I play Trundle. Just like all this tankiness, and enemies are like, well, I don't want to 1 versus 1 this guy. Maybe we should just run away. And so there's a lot of, I guess I want to say, terror inspired in the opponents, which helps me to win a lot of games of Trundle. So it's hard for me to tell how much of a factor that terror is how strong that is. Like, I don't know how much of that is just absolute terror and how much of that is like, oh wait a minute, I more than one guy is reduced attack damage. I don't know if that's true or not. I'm just suspecting maybe more guys are losing their attack damage, but I'm not entirely sure. So in other words, if there was like, that's just Sejuani there, right? But what if Garen was there too, right? So you have a Tiamat, so you just attack Sejuani, but the cleave hits him too. So if you already charged up your Chomp before you hit her, does that mean his attack damage gets reduced also, which reduces the damage that his silence can do and the damage that his spin will do, right? Or am I reading too much into that? I don't know if that's the case or not, but either way, Hydra is a great item on him because you can just cleave all that extra damage that you get, which is really nice. And then of course, there isn't a whole lot else to it. It really helps you wreck your lane opponent in general, because a lot of the time when they go to the top lane with an AD champion, their abilities are going to do more and more damage the more and more AD they have. So obviously the less and less AD they have, the less and less damage their nukes are going to do to you. So not only do you want to focus on healing and having a lot of survival, but by maxing out Chomp, you're able to increase your survival by decreasing the opponent's offense. So this is a really great ability. Now his first one is really great, and it's the reason why I pick heal as a summoner spell. So this one keeps you alive. That's the main thing to think about. And that's also why I like to get a potion at the beginning too. So with that potion, you get extra healing, so that's pretty cool. And there isn't a whole lot else to say about it. The cooldown is pretty good, but it could be even better when you get CDR, which is why I like to get Frozen Heart, obviously. Moving on, Pillar of Ice is pretty cool because it slows the movement speed of the enemies to make it harder for them to get away. There does take a certain amount of skill in this to make sure you don't block yourself, so that way you can still continue chasing. You don't want to block your allies generally either. So this is definitely one of those more interesting abilities in League of Legends, and it's pretty cool because it reminds me of like a combination of Fissure and Smokescreen from Dota 2. So like Smokescreen from Riki, of course, slowing the enemies down in an area, and once they leave, then it doesn't slow them anymore. So it's pretty cool, and it definitely takes a lot of skill to be able to utilize the most effectively. There isn't a whole lot to say about it other than that. I'm not sure if it decreases attack speed or not. It probably doesn't, but if it did, that's a bonus, obviously. Mm. At any rate, it's in League of Legends, mobility is huge. Like it's so important, and just being able to throw this down, you might even be able to get somebody to burn their flash. Like that's huge. So because they don't want to get chomped, they don't want you to cast your ultimate on them. They're gonna be scared and they want to get out of there like now. Sometimes that'll end up happening, and if not, you might be able to at least do enough damage to make them have to go all the way back to their fountain. So it can definitely make or break fights easily if you use it good. So that's a really nice ability to have, and one more reason to get more CDR, because you get more practice when you're buying CDR on him. So even if you don't like Frozen Heart for whatever reason, you can get something like Zeke's Herald. That gives you some AD and some lifesteal, and it helps your team too, which can be pretty nice. Encourage your team to fight with you. But I don't think any of his abilities scale with ability power, unfortunately, so I wouldn't build that. But anything defensive, magic resistance, armor, health, all that stuff would be fine to build on Trundle. And then attack damage is your go-to for doing actual damage. Although there's something to be said for the viability of items that do damage without giving you a lot of ability power, like Trinity Force, for example. You're only wasting 435 gold by buying a Trinity Force, because that's the ability power that you're not going to be able to use. And it's going to give you tons of physical damage, actually, because your base attack damage is actually pretty high since you're a melee champion, and I think you might be one of the higher base attack damage of the melee champions. So once you got your subjugate on somebody and you've lowered their armor, that Trinity Force is going to deal even more damage to them. It's pretty much an execute at that point. But yeah, so it's not like on my top 5 items or whatever for him, but it's still something that you can buy sometimes. So don't just totally brush off AP items altogether. If there's some kind of passive or active component of it that really helps you. But the only one that really comes to mind that seems like it would be strong is Trinity Force. Everything else, not so much. Okay. So, Subjugate, I'm not entirely sure how the opponent loses their health, how that is reckoned. It's possible that it's magic damage, and if that's the case, then if your ally buys things like Abyssal Scepter, then that could theoretically increase the damage that you deal against them. But chances are they're probably going to be running away anyways, so that might not be all that effective an item for them to have unless they are doing a pretty good job of chasing them. With that said, I don't think it's magic damage anyways, and I think it's like direct health loss, so it's a lot more similar to true damage, I think. I could be wrong though. Like I say, I haven't been playing him enough, but I do know that the main reason that I'll usually cast this is to keep myself alive, because I get all this stuff to keep me alive, and that's the main reason why I'll pick this up. Now, it does not give you maximum health though, so that's what I mean by that. It heals you up, but it's actually giving you armor and magic resist directly from them. You steal that, so that's really interesting because that just increases your durability a lot. So one thing to keep in mind is that, at least if this tooltip is correct, which it's possibly it is, I don't know about that. There's a certain amount that you get, and then it gets multiplied. So on cast you get a certain amount, and then that amount gets multiplied. It might be that it's doubled at level 1, and level 2 it's tripled, level 3 it's quadrupled, or something like that. I'm not sure. But I don't think the initial value is all that high. And it might actually last longer than 4 seconds, although I'm not really sure. 4 seconds can seem like a long time when you have your frozen domain on the field and you're just running around all all over the place, attacking. You know, you can get a lot done in just 4 seconds. So I'm not sure if that's the total duration or not. You know, could be an obsolete tooltip. We've seen them before. At any rate, he is a pretty strong champion because he's just really hard to kill. You try to mess with him, you know, you're just going to take away a lot of your damage. So I would say champions that work the best against him are probably ones that don't care all that much if you ult them. So champions that don't rely a lot on health, armor, or magic resist, and can cut through his resistances. And generally speaking, that's probably not going to be an AD champion. With that said, somebody like Varus might actually be able to kill Trundle because he might not necessarily rely on having a high amount of AD to kill him. But I would put more money on like a mid mage being able to kill him, I guess, better than a lot of other champions. And so when I do play Trundle and I'm worried about, you know, who might kill me, I think about using Subjugate on them. And sometimes this might turn out to be a waste as far as, you know, my kill potential perhaps. But a lot of the time, just being able to cast it on them and threaten them to stay away from me, that kind of keeps me alive. And that's the important thing. So making them weaker just kind of forces them to disengage so I can focus on their allies and kill them. So I would say the most effective champions against Trundle are ones that are mobile, but maybe even can make their allies mobile as well too. So somebody like Janna, for example, like if we had a Janna mid, and she might be able to get really farmed up and keep her allies running to her and away from Trundle so he can't finish them off while he ultimates her or whatever. So yeah. And I normally don't like to talk about who counters who, but that's just something that came to mind. You know, obviously if I'm playing Veigar, you know, I would say it's kind of the opposite. You would want an AD champion with like a gap closer to sneak up on him, like Shaco for example. You can that way you can blink past his stun and so on. But at the same time, you would make sure that you build just AD, so that way you could focus on, you know, critting him, and you would just slow him down with your third skill rather than necessarily throwing it at him. Or if you do throw it at him for the magic damage, that's fine, but you don't want to build AP on it because that'll just amplify Veigar's ultimate against you. So yeah, there's a lot to think about as far as how stats and mechanics work with all these champions. So tomorrow we will go over Darius and one other champion, probably one of the ones that are free to play this week. I think I might practice one of them. I'm not sure. Either Tryndamere or Xerath, perhaps. It's kind of or even Graves maybe. Or it's hard for me to decide because I like playing Janna and Galio lately, so I want to grind some more games with them. But in the meantime, I'll try to fit in some games with either Graves or Xerath or Tryndamere and see how that goes. And let you guys know what I've learned from those games. Alright guys, well hope you enjoyed episode 23 and hope you look forward to the next one. I'll talk to you guys later.